The anniversary of the end of the Second World War has always been special for people from the Bloodlands, as my friend Timothy Snyder so aptly wrote in his book of 2010. These anniversaries were special in communism. They certainly have been ominously special in the times of Putin's Russia and Russian aggression against Ukraine. And it is even more special today, in the middle of the worst pandemic in a century, when humankind is fighting a common enemy, and yet autocrats believe they can profit from this situation to weaken liberal democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, 75 years ago, the most devastating war of human history ended in Europe. This is in itself a reason to celebrate today, as it has always been and will be in 5, 10, even 25 years. But allow me to comment this obvious conclusion with 3 remarks. First, in May 1945, triumph and tragedy were closely interlinked. The most clear reason for this is, while one of the 2 most brutal totalitarianisms in human history, Hitler's Germany, had just been vanquished, the other one, Stalin's Soviet Union, was one of the winners. Not only a winner, but actually able to expand its empire beyond any foreseeable limit, deep into Central Europe. I personally, my dear friends, have only realized in my last 6 years in Brussels how difficult it is sometimes for West Europeans to grasp the tragedy of Yalta. Second, another tragic element is that first implicitly, and in recent years more and more explicitly, the celebrations of Dzień Pobiedy went hand in hand with a frank and open justification for the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact in 1939. And in the Kremlin's narrative, this infamous pact between the 2 most lethal totalitarian empires in history was more than a tactical necessity. And this is another reason to mourn rather than jubilate. In Moscow today, the commemoration of May 1945 is used to legitimize open and hybrid aggression against Ukraine since 2014. The Kremlin uses 3 elements to achieve this, and they all bear references to 1939 and 1945. It equalizes today's Ukraine with fascism, which not only trivializes real fascism, but also deflects attention from the kind of fascism which is alive and kicking in Putin's Russia itself, and in the radical right-wing movements the Kremlin supports today. This accusation against Ukraine is particularly hideous when considering how much Ukraine actually suffered during the Second World War. 2. The Kremlin uses help for ethnic Russians argument to threaten, bully and attack Russia's neighbors. Not just Ukraine. Exactly this argument was used to justify the attack on and annexation of Eastern Poland in 1939. And 3. It ultimately denies Ukraine's existence as a nation, just like Poland's existence as a nation was denied in 1939. Ladies and gentlemen, 5 years ago, Timothy Snyder, whom I have already mentioned, identified the 4 criteria the historical remembrance has to fulfill if it is so to be constructive. These are social, that is, arising from civil society and not only promoted by governments. International, that is involving more than one nation. Critical, that is self-reflective and talking about the negative sides of one's own history. And responsible, that is taking responsibility for past events and deriving lessons for the future. While the Kremlin fails on all those accounts, this should be our goal in conferences like the one today. Because, you know, there is a right way to commemorate history. Now, let me add a note as a Pole speaking to a Ukrainian conference. One of the earliest moments when I encountered this right way to remember and its distinction from the wrong one, Jan Józef Lipski, in 1982, in the middle of martial law in Poland. Dwie ojczyzny, dwa patriotyzm. I remember holding it in my hands, in cheap paper and rough print from the underground press, our samizdat, in a particularly small and sleek booklet, so you could hide it more easily in your pocket, just in case. Lipski, himself a hero of the Warsaw Uprising in 1944, and a courageous opposition intellectual after the war, in principle made exactly the same distinction between two ways to feel about one's own country. No nation state in Europe is always only the victim. Poland is no exception, and Lipski made a point of using many examples from the painful Polish-Ukrainian history connected to World War II. He was immediately vilified by Poland's communist authorities. And I must say, it pains me to see how some European governments today, in their dealings with Ukraine, do not always respect Snyder's rulebook. Friends, let us use the occasion of today's conference to practice historical remembrance in the right way. Let us commemorate the 8th of May 1945 as a combination of triumph and tragedy that it really was. And let us firmly and loudly protest when the end of World War II in Europe is used to legitimize bullying, hybrid warfare and open military aggression today. At a moment when the global pandemic threatens all of us and demands cooperation, not confrontation, thank you, and Sława Ukrainy!